And now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Judy Vazos, who is a family historian and historical detective, as she calls herself. She's been working in this field for 30 years, lives in Oakland with her husband, Tony Bishevsky, and Tony's here too. They've traveled to Nuremberg in 2015 to participate in the laying of a Stolperstein, and have also done the same for another stone in 2018 in Vienna. Judy is also the author of a book called My Dear Good Rosie, Letters from Nazi-Occupied Holland, 1940-1943. And she has a copy of her book with her, and she will show us a short film as part of her work. And so those letters were based on Tony's maternal grandparents, who wrote them from Amsterdam to their daughter Rosie in New York. But the parents were arrested and murdered in Auschwitz. So they have a particular resonance for Judy and her family. So with no further ado, I give you Judy Vazos.
Thank you. Thank you for the clapping. It's great to see familiar faces and new faces. I'm just really happy you're all here. I need to project more, right? Okay, so I will try to do that. I want to give you an idea of what's going to be part of this program. I'm going to talk for a bit about how I came to be obsessed, I would say, with Remembrance stones, and then tell you about the experience we had in Nuremberg, Germany, laying our first stone for Tony's maternal grandparents. Then we're going to have a film, and it'll show you some of what happened in Nuremberg at that ceremony. And then I'll tell you about the experience after the movie of laying the stone in Vienna and the amazing things that happened. I've tried to minimize using the words amazing and surprising and wonderful and astonishing, but believe me, those are the words that describe these experiences that we had. I came to find out stumblestones are not just inert stones. They come alive in a ceremony of remembrance, and it's just amazing what happens. So let's see. I'll read you what a stumblestone is. It refers to the small plaques placed in the sidewalk in front of the last residence of choice of people who were deported and murdered by the Nazis. The inscription on the stone begins with "Here lived" and follows with the name, date of birth, when and where the person was deported, and the date of death. So it is a memorial for the person murdered. It was initiated by the Berlin-based artist Gunter Demning in Germany in 1996, and there are now more than 70,000 of these stones in Europe. It's amazing. So, and then, you can come up and look at this later. This is a stone, or this is the plaque for the stone. And the amazing way I got this was because they made a mistake. It's for Tony's grandmother, Clemmy. They made a mistake on her death information. And I just saw it as they were putting the cement in. Okay, I can't do anything. But we did then ask them to replace the stone, which they did with the correct information. And then they were nice enough to take the plaque off and send it to me. So you can look more closely at this after the talk. I just love that it's his grandmother, Clemmy. Just touching. And you know about the handouts. Okay. So my goal today is to give you a sense of the magic of stumblestones. Tony's filming, but he's just directed it here, so I don't think he'll be in the film. And feel free to ask questions as we're going along. So I remember in career counseling when I was trying to find my way into what I wanted to be when I grew up, I was advised that I should refer to my childhood and try to remember what I was really interested in, what I felt passionate about. So I was thinking about that for this talk and realized that one of the things I loved and did over and over again was pull out boxes of Mom's photos that she kept in the bottom of the buffet. So I'd sit on the floor, pull out the box, look over and over again at all these people that were my family, and then pester my parents with, who's this, who's that? And when I could write, I wrote their names on them, on the photo. And I don't know, that just seemed, for some reason, very important to me. I had to know, I had to record who was who with their name. And then later, I saw Maya Lin's Vietnam Memorial with the names on those black slabs, and I was blown away by that representation of people that had died or were killed in the Vietnam War. So then I continued my interest when I started researching my family and started writing names on the genealogists here will know this, the family group sheets. And just, I found it very exciting. It wasn't a dull task at all. It was like, with each name, they just came alive to me, and there's stories. And so I really enjoyed that. So I realized I was in fact becoming a family historian. And I found other names or tags to put on me. One I remember reading about a remembrancer in the village who kept track of all the names of the people and the relationships. And I thought, I'm one of those. And then what I finally settled on was historical detective, because that's how I feel about what I do. So when I married Tony, he told me he'd never known his grandparents and that they'd been murdered in Auschwitz by the Nazis during the Holocaust. I was very close to my grandparents and was shocked by what he told me. I'd grown up with them, I knew all about them, and when he told me that, I felt I just really needed to know who his grandparents were. So his mother was still alive, his mother Rosie was still alive, and more than willing to share information about her parents' story. So I just wrote down every word she said, and eventually made a book about the grandparents. So while I'm absorbed in all this Jewish research, I don't know anything about the Stolpersteins at this point. But my friends were traveling in Salzburg, Austria, and stumbled onto these stones. And you don't literally fall or stumble, but they're walking along, just strolling through Salzburg, and there is this stone in the sidewalk. And they didn't know anything about them. They just were, what is this? And so they took a picture of that stone. It was for Rosa Lieb, a 20-year-old woman from Salzburg who was deported and murdered, and in 1941. And they sent that to me, and I couldn't stop staring at Rosa's stone and how it was placed right in front of the door where she lived in Salzburg. So I knew I had to find out how to get a stone for Tony's grandparents. So I wrote the Stolperstein online and requested a stone. I was told there would be a 2-year wait. This is not unusual, so practice patience. See what happens. It's just going to happen. So while I was waiting, completely out of the blue, this young woman, Louisa, from Nuremberg, sent me an email and said she was 15 at the time, but she was and not Jewish, she was very interested in the stones. And just wanted to know if she could meet me. She had seen an article I wrote about Tony's parents on the website in Germany. And she wanted to meet me and help me with this whole process of finding the stone. And I was like, wow. So she knew all about the procedure and what to do and everything. So she was invaluable. We set the date for the ceremony for the stone for October 1st, 2015. And Louisa was there. Her parents were there. In fact, her father helped us lay the stone. And they put a notice in the newspaper so that the residents of the building and anyone in Nuremberg who wishes to attend the ceremony can come. So there were lots of other people there that we really didn't know, but we're happy to have there. And then in my family history, I had unearthed a cousin of Tony's grandfather. His name was Albert, and he lived in Zurich, Switzerland, and he drove up to attend the ceremony and to read Kaddish at the ceremony, which is the Jewish prayer for the dead. So that was very meaningful. So it was a very touching ceremony. It was not completely sad because here were all these people helping us and supporting us and helping us honor these two people who had been murdered. So it just was wonderful to meet them, have them there. We went to dinner afterwards, and we're still in touch with them. I just got a card from Louisa's father. Anyway, so I think the best thing to do now is to show the film, because you'll see, we took a film while we were there, and it'll show you the people and the life around the stone. And Jackie and Irene, Tony's going to do it, okay, and who had been deported and murdered. So that was the beginning. And I think they've laid about 700 stones in Vienna. They do it a little differently. So I contacted Elizabeth, requested a stone for Natalie, and was put on a waiting list. So it was a 2-year waiting list. So just be prepared if you're going to do this. Finally, a date for the ceremony was set for June 21st, 2018. Originally, we weren't going to go, but changed our minds, and I'm very glad we did. When we saw the stone in front of the building where Natalie had lived with her husband, her children, Tony's father, and his brother Victor, it was a very powerful mix of feelings. It was just great to see her name there where she had lived in this really very beautiful building. But it was very disturbing to see the words murdered on her stone. So I came to find out that there were 65,000 Jews in Vienna who were murdered by the Nazis. And Natalie was one of the 10,000 murdered at a place called Malý Strosnik in Eastern Europe near Minsk. We had never heard of Malý Strosnik, and it turns out a lot of Viennese had never heard of Malý Strosnik. Everybody knew about Auschwitz, but they didn't know about these Eastern European countries where the killing centers were established. think Timothy Snyder has written a lot about that. So I came to find out that there were other horrible ways to be murdered. And in this case, the Jews were deported by train from Vienna to Minsk, which is in Eastern Europe, Belarus, and then taken to a nearby forest where they were lined up on the edge of the forest, and there was a pit beneath them. They were lined up there, they were shot in the back, and they fell forward into the pit. So there was a man at the ceremony in Vienna who kept saying, "You can't do this alone." That is, call up these horrible memories of how a loved one was killed. And that reminding us that they were there to help us. There were 35 people, part of the Association of Remembrance Stones and others, who just were so supportive and it just helped us get through this. We were surprised, again, to learn that a couple who lived in the building where the Bachevskys used to live were in our group. And they came up and introduced themselves, and I had brought flowers to put on the stones. And Anna, the wife of the couple, said, "Let me take the flowers, I'll get a vase and water," and reminded me that they would be looking after the stone and Natalie. They were also interested in whatever we knew about the time that the Bachevskys lived in that building. So we exchanged emails and stayed in touch during our remaining time in Vienna. And we were exchanging a lot of information, but we were stunningly surprised when we got an email from them that showed a picture of Tony's grandmother in a portrait painted by Oskar Kokoschka, who is one of the most famous painters in Vienna. This was painted in 1907, and Natalie commissioned Kokoschka for this painting as a wedding present to her husband, who she would soon marry in 1907. So we had heard about this painting, but had never seen it, didn't know where it was. And the email let us know that there had been an exhibit in 2015 at a gallery just outside of Vienna, Kokoschka's home, actually. And Natalie's portrait was, I think it was the center of the exhibit. So there it was. It was astonishing. So like a good historical detective, I followed up with the gallery owner, who told me that now Natalie's portrait was on permanent loan at the Leopold Museum in Vienna, where we were. So through yet another person who was at the ceremony, she made arrangements for us to go to the Leopold and see the portrait of Natalie. So we met with the director of the Leopold and the chief curator, and they brought in Natalie's portrait, and then they asked Tony to stand next to the portrait, and we were all teary-eyed just seeing Tony next to his grandmother, and what are the chances that they would be reunited in this way. And there's a picture outside, but anyway, their hands are held in the same way. It's just another amazing thing. So we had all kinds of questions for the staff of the Leopold, like, how did you get this? Where has it been? And who owns it? And can we get it? And they answered some of the questions, but many of them are still, the questions are still lingering, and I doubt that we will never have that portrait in our home. But they are going to have a retrospective of Kokoschka's work, and Natalie will be in that show at the Leopold in April of this year. So I don't know if we're going to go. So we're still in contact with them, and we took pictures of Natalie's portrait, and I framed it, and that's in our living room. So she's with us in a way I never could have imagined. We had gone to Vienna to commemorate her death, and then she comes to us as a young, beautiful woman in the Leopold. It still blows my mind, as they say. This experience falls into the category of a phrase I love, which I've used with my friends here at Kaiser, which is, you never know. So I just have to repeat that. You never know what's going to happen when you start a journey like this. Anything can happen. And on that note, I will end and take any questions. Yes?
There's a, excuse me.
Yeah.
You can't claim that under the...
Apparently not.
Why?
Because it wasn't pilfered by the Nazis. It somehow got out of Vienna. What we can tell from the report they did is that it got out with Tony's uncle. I don't know how he did that. It's a big portrait. And then he gave it to this woman he married on his deathbed. And then she sold it to a gallery. And then it went another gallery and another gallery. And we've tried to, through the Leopold, write to the man who had the portrait, who gave it to the Leopold on permanent loan. And he says he's sworn to secrecy. He can't tell us anything more than we already know. So, I don't know, I've been in touch with, the restitution boards, and maybe there's something. I mean, there's also property there that the Bachevskys own that we'll have to see if we can get any restitution for. But no, as it stands now, it's case closed. I know. It was heartbreaking to leave Vienna without her. I was like, wow, don't you want to come home with us, don't you? And they were all very understanding. We can see why you want to do this. But anyway, yes?
What happened to the rest of Natalie's family? You said you placed a single stone for Natalie.
Yes.
What happened to the rest of the relatives?
Her husband died shortly after the Nazis invaded Austria in 1938. So he was gone. Victor got out, her son, and eventually ended up in Berlin. And then Tony's father went to went to London and then New York. And we found these organizations that lay the stones will do research for you through various organizations. And we found out through them that Natalie's sister, Bertha, was also murdered, and her sister-in-law, Matilda, was also murdered. So at the ceremony, we also acknowledged Bertha and Matilda, and there were others in the family, but the nuclear family. Yes?
And why are these stones being laid only in Germany and Austria and not in the many other countries which have had murder.
They've expanded their borders. They are all over. I cannot list the countries, but the Czech Republic, and I think they put one in Sweden. They're all over. Italy, yes.
How about
They're not in
France?
France.
Anything in
yes.
France?
France,
Yeah.
yes. No?
Not
Oh,
that
yes.
I know of.
Oh, yes. I thought France had been included when he expanded outside of Germany.
Do you have a link to their website on your website?
I don't have it on the website, but it's on my, the handout.
Not on resources, for example, you don't have a
I
link?
don't because, because. Yes.
Why is there the tremendous disparity in the price of these between Germany and Austria?
I know. I wondered about that too. One of the things is that the one in Austria is larger, and you can put 4 names on there. And they told us when we were applying that if it was if the cost was a burden, they would find a way to help defray the cost.
What was the cost?
It's on there, 670.
768.
768.
Austria, 140 in Germany.
Yeah, it's quite, I mean, like, it's 8 by 8, so this is 4 by 4, so it is larger. Plus, in Vienna, they lay it before you come. In Germany, it's part of the ceremony, the actual laying, as you saw on the film. And they also create a booklet with, they ask us to tell them about anything we knew about Natalie. So they put that in a booklet, which is also out there by the photos. But I don't know. It's a jump.
Judy, I saw ones that were on walls in Vienna, and that might also be more expensive, like to put it on
A wall of a building. Yeah. I think what happens is that sometimes, you have to get permission from the residents, and sometimes they don't want them on the sidewalk. In Munich, they are now allowing stones, but for a while, the Jewish community there did not want them because people would walk on them, they would get dirty, dogs could do their business on them. But now they are allowing a form. I've never seen one. I don't know. Maybe they're on the side of the building as well. Yes?
That was kind of my question. How have, local residents and local communities reacted? Because it could also be shameful, potentially. And has there been pushback or, negative response?
Actually, in Nuremberg, you're supposed to get permission to lay this on the public sidewalk. But in Nuremberg, I think because that was the hotbed of anti-Semitism, they're just so open to the idea. I mean, the mayor and the city council and everything just automatically gives you permission to do this. And then they do let the residents know. Our experience was that a couple of the residents were very interested and friendly. I'm sure I think Tony saw someone just puff by, like not exactly approving, but we never had contact with that person. But I'm sure there are people that feel we're just digging it in, really. But I think generally there's a great acceptance of it, especially in Nuremberg and now in Vienna. Yes?
How are the stones consecrated or charged? I mean, there's the physical stone, but my experience saying Kaddish for my deceased parents was, after a while, that has a symbolism and meaning to it, and I don't know how that is related to these stones here. I'm not sure if that makes sense to you.
Well, we considered when Albert read the Kaddish, we just considered it a blessing
Yeah.
for Hugo and Clemmy and Frida. Some people put something underneath the stone, some symbolic.
Is there a relationship between these stones and the stones you lay up at the cemetery at visitation
No.
on the cemetery?
No.
The stones at the cemetery are to remember that you were there, not about the person that was buried, but about your remembrance of them. So these are, in effect, a civil action to remember, the same way that you see that this is a place where Mozart lived on a plaque. It's not a consecrated activity, it's a remembrance by the people who follow, not specifically a activity related to the life of the person and their religious beliefs.
Okay.
That helps
Yes.
explain it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Can you say that again, please?
Well, it's about, the stones are a civil remembrance of what happened. They're not a religious activity related to that person's life. So it doesn't carry the idea of consecration. It's consecrated in our memory, but it isn't part of a religious ceremony that relates to the individual and their activity. Does that help? It's a little subtle, but it's the difference between a civil and a religious
Thank you.
remembrance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Explaining that. Yes, Jason?
Judy, did you say that the Jewish community in one or more of these places opposed the laying of
In
these
Munich,
stones?
I think also in Belgium. They just thought they didn't think it was a good way because you could walk on the stones and the stones got dirty. And they just didn't approve of the way the stones were handled.
Uh-huh.
They've changed their mind,
They have?
yes. And as I said, I don't know what their stones look like. They might go up on the buildings.
Yeah.
On the side of it,
Yeah.
probably.
That's astonishing to me.
That they
They
opposed
opposed
it.
it. Yeah.
Well, it started as an artistic endeavor. The guy who did it is an artist, and he did
Oh,
it
uh-huh.
as an artistic activity,
I see.
and like
Oh.
performance art almost.
Uh-huh.
And that it was a way to help continue this process of acknowledging what had happened, whether you took responsibility for it or not. And one of the interesting things is a lot of the people who were against it as it began to spread were caught between the idea of opposing it because they thought, for example, that it might get dirty, and opposing it because they didn't want to be forced to remember. So there's always this kind of mixed motive going on, and people are not always forthcoming as to which side they're really on.
Right.
On the other hand, there are people who believe that these stones do, in effect, become equivalent to a grave, or actually a cenotaph, which is where you have a remembrance of someone where the body is not there. And that then you wouldn't want that to be something that you walk upon, in the sense that you don't walk on a grave, so that they have a good
Yeah.
reason or reasoning about why it should be on the wall rather than on the
That makes
ground.
sense.
But that's not what the artist was attempting to accomplish when he started the process.
Yes, and I
And
just
so
want.
there is this, there is always contradiction in any of these kinds of actions
Sure.
as to who is against it and why.
Right.
And so at this point, especially for us, it's not our issue. I mean, it's Judy's issue and Tony's issue, but not for the rest of us, unless we find our own relative who was involved.
So I just wanted to say that the artist, Gunter, when he started this, he thought of it as a symbolic act to remember the Jews that were murdered. And he knows he will never be able to lay a stone for the thousands of Jews that were murdered. So it continues to be a symbolic act. but he is totally dedicated to this project. It's his life's work.
And he's a German and not
He's
Jewish.
a German,
He's not
right?
Jewish.
Yeah, right. Thanks. Yes.
I thought that you could also lay the stumbling stolpersteine if the person had not been killed, but just had been removed or emigrated because of fascism.
I have
Because I
heard
think
that. I
that-
think someone's here who has a picture of that.
Yeah, my family was also.
That were,
My mother's family, the town where she lived installed the stones without my knowledge. I think they did it as a group of Jews in that area. And my grandparents, well, my grandfather died shortly after Kristallnacht. He was on there. My mother and her brother made it to America, and they're both on there. So everybody's there, but not, I don't know, my grandmother was murdered, but the others were not. So you can put people who were deported or kinder transport or whatever.
So I visited a stone in Berlin because a friend had just put it in.
Yeah.
And the stone said that these people had fled to Guatemala.
Exactly.
So they were not murdered.
Yeah, you can do that, absolutely. Anybody who was the victim of the Nazi regime.
yes.
Could the Jews in Germany who oppose having these stones installed in urban places, could they be thinking that because of the rise of fascism not only in Germany but throughout Europe and in the United States, that these stones would be defaced possibly? Or is that happened?
I
Do you
think
see
that
in
has
your-
happened. I think on the website, there's a picture of one where it's been, the name has been crossed out. So anything can happen with that kind of bigotry.
Has there been a pushback, do you think?
For the stones, not that I'm aware of. They, 2-year wait, they're still laying them, they're still being accepted in all these cities. And, I mean, his area has expanded so much. I mean, different countries than beyond Germany.
So is he still the only one who's doing them?
He has an assistant who creates the stones. And then he tries to be at the ceremonies to install the stones. But in our case, I mean, he can't be. He's just too busy. But in Nuremberg, he has an assistant, and I think in other cities, he has assistants who help people lay the stone. In our case, he wasn't there. An assistant was. Patrice? Oh, I thought you had just. Were you just waving? Hi. Okay.
Did you talk a little bit about your book?
Surely. So this is my book, and this is my book, which was just published this 2018. It was published, and it contains letters that Tony's grandparents, who were trapped in Holland, in Amsterdam, wrote to his mother, who was in New York. And they wrote over 100 letters, and she had shown us one just in passing. Anyway, at the end, sort of close to the end of her life, we had to clean out her apartment at the Rhoda Goldman Center. And we found these letters, all in German, over 100 of them, and we had them translated. So the book is the letters and background and photographs of the family, and is available.
Can you say the title?
Oh, the title is My Dear Good Rosie, Letters from Nazi-Occupied Holland, 1940, 1943.
But why you chose the title?
Oh, why I chose, thank you, Irene. their daughter's name, Tony's mother's name, was Rosie. And they always began, usually, always began a letter with, "My dear good Rosie." So that's.
A lifetime before the first ones were laid, but they have gained a life of their own, and they will become another element in the history of these countries and of these people.
It's beautifully said.
Thank
Beautifully said.
Thanks, Jeff. And additional thoughts are, there's a table with display materials just outside of this door, which we invite you, and Judy especially would like you to take a look at. You can see her about the book. We have refreshments outside. This center is open till 7 o'clock this evening, although it's now open to the public as of a half an hour from now. So note that we're co-using this space, and you want to be aware of where you put your things down. And finally, the evaluation forms you all have, we'd love for you to fill them out and leave them on the table outside, or hand them to me or to Judy, who will collect them all in one place by the end of the afternoon.
Are there pencils available?
There are some outside, yes.
Good question, Marta.
Thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you again at another event.
Thank you, Barbara.
All right.